Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Spacing Out podcast. So I bought some more Bitcoin. I know, I've been bullish on Ethereum for a hot minute. I liked the concept of Ethereum as a platform a little bit better. Well, a lot better, actually, because it has the opportunity to create other businesses. I like that concept over I didn't like Bitcoin for a minute. It's significant that I'm buying Bitcoin because I've had Ethereum as a larger position for a long time. I've never actually owned a significant portion of Bitcoin. At least I haven't in recent. So, there were several reasons for that, though. One, I couldn't think of another time where a technology that never got updates became a long-standing, persistent factor, and I looked at it as a technology. But the other day, someone actually said radio waves was a good example of something that did persist, and it was good. It was clever. That's right. But the thing that should be considered with that is that there's technologies built on top of Bitcoin, the Litecoin and stuff, that kind of compensate for the things it lacks, which is pretty clever. And I wasn't giving that enough weight. The other thing is I was kind of worried about the fact that theoretically someone could crash it. Or at one point I believed that someone could theoretically crash it. It would just be an extremely expensive process. And that was originally, there's a very popular debate between Peter Schiff and Mike Green. I'm a really big fan of Mike Green. I think he's the owner of Simplified Hedge Fund. And I think he's a very thoughtful investor. Everyone knows who Peter Schiff is. But that debate was really interesting. That whole debate actually was centered around Bitcoin and gold. And I, from it, walked away definitely with the opinion that if you don't like gold, you shouldn't like Bitcoin. If you don't like Bitcoin, you shouldn't like gold. Because they actually have pretty much the same fundamental arguments for ownership. So that was kind of funny to realize. But bringing it back to, I read Rob Powell's 16-page report over Bitcoin, and I think even he's been preaching about Ethereum. And I believe there's a bunch of clips of him and Michael Saylor, who's the he's the CEO of Microvast. Is that right? Yeah, Microvast Strategies. And he was super early to the game, got institutions into Bitcoin. Company's doing really well, but they're really good friends. Michael Saylor in particular is, I think, fully, or maybe it was Anthony Pompeo, who's known in the space for dumping his entire net worth into Bitcoin. I think Michael Saylor just has a significant amount. I think he's very open about it. I think it's actually in the billions. Something like that. But that probably is swaying Rob Powell's opinion to a certain extent. Obviously, everyone's got some bias, but it was a 16-page report, and there wasn't very much opinion in that, other than the way he might have organized the data. But I went through it with a critical eye, and it seemed like a very solid argument having to do with the cycles, the halving process that occurs with the coin, and the adoption rate that it's undergoing, and how those supply and demand effects, like what drives them, and the timing too. So I also think it's pretty significant to see people like him get so excited and so absurdly bullish. At the same time, it makes me more cautious. And maybe I'm just more cautious because I'm a younger investor. I just feel like I'm more likely to get excited and all in something and get blown up. I mean, we've all made our mistakes early on when we were learning this stuff. But, yeah. The upper projections he had Bitcoin like next year hitting like 220,000 a coin, which is, it's astounding. But it does make sense with the narrative that was laid out. I think but and also understand it's like I wouldn't say the stars would have to align, but it would be all the good things would need to happen. And usually I wouldn't be surprised if it does occur, but it just ends up taking a little bit longer than expected. Because storylines just usually don't beeline. Yeah, so I bought some more Bitcoin though. I still own a little bit more Ethereum, but if we get some more dips on Bitcoin, I might just shift my positioning some more. And I've been also buying up some smaller coins and kind of diversified out, expecting rally to come back in full force. I actually haven't. Let me see if I can pull this up right here and see where we're at. I don't know if I've. Yeah, Bitcoin's currently at 54,000. Ethereum's at 30. Is that 3,600? It is. I think that means it's overperforming. Yeah, it's definitely outperforming Bitcoin right now. Ethereum's an interesting one because there still is an argument that Ethereum blows up. Especially, it could depend on, well, it would also, Ethereum has more competition than Bitcoin, right? And the way that Rob Powell pitched this was Bitcoin is the base, is the OG. And everything else correlates to it. Therefore, if you're scared of the success of the other coins or whether they're going to work out as like a business, you just buy Bitcoin is the whole argument. And he considers Ethereum. I didn't personally assume that Ethereum was a smaller player. I was kind of thinking that like top 10 should probably be safe if you're in market cap. If you're diversified in top 10, I mean, weight yourself in the top 3, right? I mean, just play to how things naturally occur in the universe. Typically, when you're laying out data sets, your overperformers are going to be a small subset, and your drop-offs are going to be more significant. This occurs across almost all data collections. I'm trying to think of another example. IQ is another example. The difference between someone with a 150 IQ and a 160 IQ is greater than the difference between a 140 IQ and a 150 IQ. They're both 10-point differences, but the performance in those 10-point differences become more exponentially greater, and the gaps become wider as you get further out to the fringes of the data set and the outliers. So I was thinking that most people would assume that the heavy weighted coins would be all relatively safe. But then I was reading through this report, knowing that it's important kind of paying attention to anything like a society like that does. It's getting a little cultish. Just kidding, but I think a lot of companies in the U.S. are. And Professor Scott Galloway from New York University actually he does a YouTube series where he does weekly charts. If you're not familiar, you should definitely check that out because it's a great series. And he covered how it's the lowest ever in the U.S. for people who go to church, and then the relationship that kind of pairs with the more culty these companies get. And I think it's just a phenotypical appearance for our genetic tendency to want to form groups of like-minded people. We'll fill in the gap. We'll fill that somehow. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. So the Real Vision companies, like one of these, and it's important to see what they think on things, or if they put up a big report like that. I can't help myself. I have to look because I know that this is probably a collection of opinions and not just one person's. Especially, because they all bounce each other's ideas. So a lot of those ideas have been put under a good amount of scrutiny, and that's really where you want to, if you're doing research and you find a group like that, that's a great place to dig. Anywhere where you can find a nice clash of ideas. Otherwise, you have to police yourself, which is essential. If you want to be a good investor or good at a good trader, you cannot become possessed by any ideologies, or you're gonna get too stuck in a thought process, and then the market's gonna blindside you. You have to self-police yourself by making sure that if you're getting too much information on one perspective, that you start challenging it and picking it apart as many times as you can, much like how now I'm buying more Bitcoin because I've been pretty bullish on Ethereum for a minute. And I'm still not completely convinced, but I'm going to have my portfolio reflect my uncertainty until I have further clarification. I think that's okay. We'll actually end the podcast with this. In Darwinism, it is not the strongest or the smartest that necessarily survives. It's the most adaptable. Have a great night, folks. I'll see you on the next episode.